The best commentaries from the last video.
It's funny how life can change in a single moment. One minute you think everything's perfect, you're happily married, working hard for your family, and everything feels like it's falling into place. But then, without warning, the ground beneath you shifts and you're left with nothing but the wreckage of everything you once held dear. I remember that day so clearly. It was supposed to be like any other. I was working late at the office, trying to finish up a project that had been dragging on for weeks. My wife, Jenna, had texted me earlier, saying she'd be out with some friends, so I wasn't expecting her home until late. But that night I got a text from her. Just 3 words. I'm leaving you. At first, I thought it was a joke. I mean, we'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. Sure, we'd had our ups and downs, but we always worked through them. But as I kept reading, the words started to hit me like a punch in the gut. She wasn't just leaving me. She was leaving me for another man. She said he was someone who deserved her, someone who could give her the life she wanted. And just like that, everything I knew about my life, everything I thought was real, started to crumble around me. She didn't even give me a chance to fight for us. She took the money, the house, the life we built together. And I was left standing there, with nothing but the emptiness of her words echoing in my mind. I thought, how could she do this to me? How could she leave me for him? But that wasn't the hardest part. No, the hardest part was when I realized who he was. It was a man I knew well, someone I thought of as a friend, someone I trusted. His name was Mark. He'd been a close friend of mine for years, a guy I had invited into my home, shared my life with. And now, it turned out that he was the one who had been quietly seducing my wife behind my back. It felt like a sick joke. The betrayal stung worse than anything I could have imagined. Jenna didn't just leave me for anyone. She left me for my own best friend. The man who was supposed to have my back, the man who was supposed to help me through life's challenges, had turned out to be the one to destroy everything I cared about. I spent the next few days in a haze. I barely ate, barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was the image of Jenna and Mark together, laughing, smiling, living the life that should have been mine. I was broken. Empty. It felt like the weight of the world was crashing down on me, and there was no escape. But as bad as it seemed, I knew I couldn't stay in that place forever. I couldn't let them win. I had to find a way to rebuild, to move on. But I didn't know how. Not yet. Little did I know that the answer would come from the most unexpected place. I didn't expect anything to change in the first few weeks. I was still lost in the whirlwind of emotions, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my life. Jenna was gone, and Mark was with her, living the life we were supposed to have. I didn't know where to turn or who to talk to. But there was someone I had overlooked in all of this, Sarah. Sarah was Mark's ex-wife. We had always gotten along well, but I hadn't seen her much after her and Mark split up a few years ago. We had a mutual respect for each other, but we were never really close. After all, I was married, and she was dealing with her own things. I didn't think much of her during the chaos, but then, one night, she reached out to me. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was late, and I was sitting alone in the living room, staring at the walls, feeling sorry for myself. My phone buzzed, and I saw her name on the screen. Hey, it's Sarah. Can we talk? At first, I hesitated. I wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone, especially someone tied to the person who had just shattered my life. But something inside me told me I needed to hear what she had to say. So I picked up the phone. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. I know this isn't the best time, but I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. I heard about what happened with Jenna and Mark, and I wanted to reach out. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. I was taken aback. It wasn't what I expected, but at the same time, it was what I needed. Sarah didn't have an agenda. She wasn't trying to make things better for herself. She just wanted to listen, and for the first time in a long while, I felt heard. She didn't judge me or pity me. She understood the pain of betrayal, and for some reason, that comforted me. We talked for hours at night. At first, it was just small talk, but then, as the conversation flowed, we found ourselves opening up to each other in ways we never had before. Sarah shared her experiences with Mark, how he had hurt her, how their marriage had fallen apart. She didn't hold back, and neither did I. I told her everything about Jenna, the betrayal, and how I felt like my world had been torn apart. It felt good to have someone who truly understood, someone who didn't see me as a victim but as a person. It was a strange kind of solace, and as the night wore on, I found myself laughing, something I hadn't done in weeks. When we finally hung up, it was well past midnight, and for the first time since Jenna left, I didn't feel completely alone. Sarah had been there for me when I least expected it, and I realized that, in some strange way, she had become a lifeline. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I started talking more. It wasn't forced or rushed, but slowly, we developed a connection. We met for coffee a few times, just to talk about life, about the things that hurt, about the things we wanted for the future. And with each conversation, I felt more and more at ease with her. She was a different person than I had ever imagined, strong, funny, and incredibly resilient. She wasn't asking for anything, and neither was I. We were just two people, sharing the weight of the world with each other, learning to heal in our own way. It was refreshing, like I had finally found someone who didn't see me as just a victim, but as someone who could stand tall again. But the more time I spent with Sarah, the more I realized something. I wasn't just finding comfort in her company. There was something deeper, something unspoken, that had begun to grow between us. It was like the universe had conspired to bring us together at the right time, and while I didn't fully understand what it meant yet, I knew that it was something I couldn't ignore. I wasn't looking for love, not after everything that had happened. But in Sarah, I found a connection I hadn't expected, and a part of me wondered what would happen if I let myself open up to it. The path ahead wasn't clear, but I knew one thing for sure: whatever happened next, I wasn't going to let the past define me. And I wasn't going to let Jenna or Mark have the last word. Things between Sarah and me didn't evolve overnight. At first, it was just a friendship, but we both knew there was an undeniable chemistry between us that went beyond just shared pain. It felt like we were both trying to rebuild our lives, one small piece at a time, and somehow, we ended up doing that together. I think we were both surprised by it, by how natural it felt, by how comfortable we became around each other. There was a vulnerability between us that we didn't have with anyone else. We could talk about anything: the betrayals, the scars we both carried, the things we had learned about ourselves. In a way, it was like we were healing together, not because we were looking to fix each other, but because we were offering each other something we hadn't had in a long time: understanding. But there was always that little voice in my head, reminding me of the boundaries. Sarah was Mark's ex. He was the reason she had been hurt, the reason their marriage had ended. And I had no intention of doing the same thing to her that Mark had done to me. I wasn't looking for a rebound, and I certainly wasn't looking to get involved in some kind of messy drama. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized that what I felt for her wasn't just some temporary distraction. It was real. One afternoon, we decided to take a walk through the park, just to clear our heads. The sun was setting, casting everything in a golden glow, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. As we walked, we talked about our dreams, our hopes for the future. Sarah had always wanted to travel, to see the world, and I couldn't help but smile when I realized how much she reminded me of the person I used to be before everything fell apart. She was still that person, strong, adventurous, and full of life. "I want to be happy again," she said quietly, looking out at the lake. "I don't want to let the past hold me back anymore." It hit me right then. We were both at a crossroads. We could let the past consume us, or we could choose to move forward. We could let the pain define us, or we could use it to create something new. "Me too," I said. "I don't want to stay stuck in this place forever. We deserve more than that." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was a shared understanding, a shared decision to take control of our futures. That evening, as we said our goodbyes and I drove home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't sure where this was all heading, but I knew one thing: I wasn't alone anymore. And Sarah, well, she had become someone important to me, in ways I hadn't expected. It was only a few days later when the unexpected happened. I had been seeing Sarah more frequently, sometimes just grabbing a coffee, other times meeting up to talk about everything and nothing. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized how much I appreciated her presence in my life. But then, the phone rang, and I knew right away it was Mark. He hadn't reached out to me since the whole situation blew up, and part of me thought he never tried to contact me again. I didn't want to pick it up, but something inside me told me I should. Maybe it was the curiosity, or maybe the need to confront him, to see if he would even apologize for what he did. I wasn't sure. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hey," I said, trying to sound calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. There was silence on the other end for a moment, then Mark spoke, his voice low. "I know you're probably not going to want to talk to me, but I need to say something." I rolled my eyes, feeling my anger flare up again. "What could you possibly have to say, Mark? You've already taken everything from me." He sighed. "I know I've messed up. I've been a piece of shit. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to let you know that Jenna's been cheating on me. She's been seeing someone else this whole time." I froze. The words didn't fully register at first, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had misunderstood him. "What?" I finally managed to say. "What are you talking about?" Mark continued, his voice thick with frustration. "I found out a couple of days ago. She's been with someone else. I just didn't want to tell you before. I didn't want to make things worse." I could feel my stomach drop. It was like the rug had been pulled out from under me all over again. Jenna hadn't just left me for him. She had been with someone else the entire time, even while I was still married to her. The betrayal, the lies, it was almost too much to take in. And now, here he was, telling me that the woman he left me for had been playing him just like she had played me. I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell him that it didn't matter anymore, that she was his problem now. But another part of me, well, that part was angry, confused, and hurt in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. "Well," I said after a long pause, trying to keep my voice steady, "that's your mess to deal with now, Mark. I don't want anything to do with her anymore or with you." He let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I get that. But I just wanted you to know. I know I fucked up, man." I didn't say anything else. I just hung up. There was nothing left to say. Jenna had thrown everything away, and I had watched as Mark destroyed our friendship, our trust. And now, it turned out that everything I thought was real, the love, the loyalty, the promises, was built on lies. The phone call left me reeling. I wasn't sure what to feel, what to think. But I knew one thing: this had changed everything. I immediately called Sarah, needing to talk to someone. When she picked up, I didn't know where to start. I was angry, heartbroken, confused. But as soon as I heard her voice, I felt that strange sense of calm return. "Hey," she said softly. "What happened?" "Jenna's been cheating on me," I said, almost in disbelief. "The whole time. And Mark, he's been played just like I was." There was silence for a moment, and then Sarah spoke again, her tone gentle. "I'm sorry. That's so messed up. But you're stronger than this. You're better than this." I sighed, rubbing my forehead. "I don't even know what to think anymore." "Take a breath," she said. "I know this is a lot to process, but you don't have to figure it all out tonight." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me out of the swirling mess in my head. I wasn't alone. Sarah was there for me, and even though the past few days had been filled with confusion, I felt like I had someone who truly understood. The anger, the pain, the frustration, it all started to settle as I realized something. This was my opportunity to finally take control. I wasn't going to let Jenna or Mark hold any more power over me. It was time to move forward, to start building the life I wanted. And this time, I wasn't doing it alone. The next few weeks were a blur. My life felt like it was in a constant state of flux. On one hand, there was this overwhelming sense of loss and betrayal that I couldn't shake off. On the other, I found myself drawn more and more to Sarah, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had something to look forward to. We began spending even more time together. Not out of desperation, but because, without even realizing it, we were becoming each other's support system. It wasn't romantic at first, at least I told myself it wasn't. It was just a friendship that, over time, deepened into something more. I could talk to Sarah about everything, my anger at Jenna, my confusion about Mark, my frustration with the whole situation. And she listened. She didn't judge. She understood. Then one evening, as we sat on my couch after another long conversation, Sarah said something that made my heart race. "You know," she began, her eyes meeting mine, "there's something I've been thinking about. I think you've been through enough to know what you want out of life. What kind of life you want to build." I wasn't sure where this was going, but I nodded, intrigued. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath before continuing. "I mean, you've already lost so much. But I can see it, you have this strength, even though you don't always feel it. You've got the potential to rebuild, to create something amazing from this. And I want to be there for you." The way she said it, with such sincerity, made something inside me shift. There was no pity in her words, no sympathy. She wasn't trying to save me. She was simply saying, "I believe in you." "Thanks, Sarah," I said quietly, feeling the weight of her words sink in. "I don't know what I would have done without you." And in that moment it hit me. I had started to care for her in a way that went beyond friendship. It was subtle at first, but the feelings were there, buried under the surface. The more time we spent together, the more I realized I didn't want to just heal from the past. I wanted a future with her. I wanted to build something with her, something real. But I knew I couldn't rush into anything. I had to be honest with myself and with Sarah. I had just come out of a marriage, and I didn't want to drag anyone into my emotional chaos. But at the same time, the connection between us was undeniable. It was like we were both waiting for the right moment to take the next step. The days went by, and as we continued to grow closer, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in months. We started talking more openly about our future. Sarah wanted to travel, to explore the world. She had dreams, and I realized that I wanted to help her achieve them. At the same time, I had my own aspirations. I wanted to rebuild my career, to find something fulfilling that would allow me to live the life I deserved. But as much as we talked about our goals, one thing lingered in the back of my mind: Mark. I had barely seen him since the phone call, and I had no idea what he was doing or how he was processing the fact that everything had fallen apart for him as well. The guilt of moving on from everything, of potentially moving on with Sarah, ate at me from time to time. It wasn't just about me anymore. Sarah was now a part of my life, and I knew I needed to figure out what to do with that. Was I ready for this? Was she? I didn't want to hurt her, didn't want to drag her into my messy situation. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the way she made me feel, like I was starting to believe in life again, in love again, in a future that wasn't overshadowed by my past. One evening, as we were sitting in my kitchen, Sarah turned to me with that same calm confidence she always carried. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking about something. About what comes next for us." I felt my heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are we just going to keep pretending like this thing between us is nothing? We're not kids anymore, and I think we both know it's something more. We can either sit here, acting like we don't feel it, or we can take a chance on each other." Her words were bold, but there was no pressure in them. It was like she was giving me permission to take the leap, to stop hiding from the feelings that had been growing inside both of us. I took a deep breath. I don't know if I'm ready for this, but I know one thing. I don't want to keep living in the past. I want to try with you. Sarah smiled softly, her eyes warm. I think that's all I needed to hear. And just like that, everything shifted. It wasn't some grand declaration, but a quiet, shared understanding. We weren't just two people who had been hurt. We were two people who had the chance to build something new, something stronger. I didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I wasn't just rebuilding my life. Maybe I was starting to build it with someone who was meant to be there. The days that followed felt almost surreal. Everything in my life was starting to change, slowly but steadily. Sarah and I had become a team. We worked on small projects together, talked about things that mattered, and shared pieces of ourselves that we hadn't shared with anyone else. It was refreshing, like a new chapter in my life was unfolding, and Sarah was the person I wanted by my side. But the past has a funny way of catching up with you, and for all the progress I had made, there were still pieces of the old me, the old life, that I couldn't shake off. It wasn't just the lingering pain from my marriage, it was the constant reminder of what had happened, of Mark's betrayal and Jenna's lies. I couldn't escape those memories, no matter how much I tried. And then, one day it happened. I was getting coffee when I saw him. Mark. Standing across the street, talking to someone. My stomach dropped. I wasn't prepared for this, not yet. I had spent so many months avoiding him, avoiding the thought of him, and now, here he was. I could feel the anger and resentment rise in my chest, but there was also something else, something I didn't expect, a sense of relief. It wasn't that I wanted to confront him. I wasn't looking for closure or some dramatic showdown. I just didn't care anymore. He had taken everything from me, and in return, I had built something better. I had built a life that wasn't controlled by the past, a life where I didn't have to think about his mistakes. For the first time, I realized that he no longer had any power over me. But still, seeing him was a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Of the pain I had tried to bury, of the life that had been stolen from me. I wasn't ready to face that part of myself yet. I turned away before he saw me, hoping the sight of him didn't pull me back into the darkness I had fought so hard to escape. The last thing I wanted was to go back to that place, a place of anger, self-doubt, and endless questions. I didn't need answers anymore. I just needed to keep moving forward. I went home that day, my mind racing with thoughts of Mark, of Jenna, and everything that had happened. But when I saw Sarah, sitting on the couch, her face soft and understanding, everything else faded away. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. She knew. "Hey," she said, her voice gentle. "You okay?" I nodded, sitting down beside her. "Yeah, just seeing him again, I guess. It stirred up a lot of stuff." She reached for my hand, squeezing it lightly. "You don't have to deal with any of it alone, you know that, right?" Her words were simple, but they carried so much weight. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to just be there for me until that moment. I had been so focused on rebuilding myself, on trying to make everything better, that I forgot I didn't have to do it all alone. We sat there in silence for a while, letting the moment settle between us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for once, I wasn't running from my past. I wasn't trying to outrun the pain. I was facing it, acknowledging it, and moving forward with someone who made me feel like I wasn't defined by it. I knew there was still a long way to go, but as I sat next to Sarah, I realized that the future wasn't as scary as it once seemed. We had both been through so much, and yet here we were, still standing, still hopeful. The past would always be there, but it no longer had the power to dictate our lives. We were the ones in control now. Things had begun to settle into a rhythm between Sarah and me. We found comfort in each other, and the weight of our past didn't seem as heavy as it once had. I was still processing everything, but I no longer felt like I was drowning in it. Sarah's presence had been a constant source of stability, something I didn't even know I needed until she was there. But as the days went on, I began to realize something I had been trying to avoid. Sarah had become more than just my friend. She had become someone I cared about deeply. I didn't know when it happened, or how it happened, but the connection between us had transformed into something undeniable. And, despite my fears of repeating the past, I couldn't ignore it any longer. One night, As we sat on my balcony watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Sarah turned to me. She had that look in her eyes, the kind that made my heart beat a little faster. "You know," she started, her voice soft, "I never thought I'd be in this place. After everything that happened with Mark, I thought I'd be alone forever. But with you, I don't feel that way." I froze, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't that I didn't feel the same. It was just complicated. I had just been through a painful marriage, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for something this serious again. But as I looked at Sarah, I realized that I was already more involved than I had ever expected. "Sarah," I said, my voice a little rough, "I care about you. More than I ever thought I would. But I'm not sure if I'm ready for everything. After what happened with Jenna, I'm scared of making the same mistakes again." She nodded, her expression understanding. "I get it. And I'm not rushing anything. I just needed you to know how I feel. I'm here, no matter what." Her words, simple as they were, meant more to me than anything else. In that moment, I knew we both had our fears, our baggage, but we also had a choice. We could either let those fears hold us back, or we could face them together. We spent the next few days in quiet contemplation. I knew I had to be honest with myself, and with Sarah. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when, deep down, I was scared of what this might mean. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't ignore how much Sarah had come to mean to me. And so, a few days later, I made a decision. I invited Sarah over, hoping to find the right words. When she arrived, I was nervous, my mind racing. But as soon as she walked in, I knew I had to tell her how I felt, no matter the outcome. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady this time, "I've been thinking a lot about everything about us. And I can't keep pretending that I'm not scared. But I also can't keep running from what's real. I care about you. A lot. And I'm ready to take that chance. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to try." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. She just walked over to me, placed her hand on my chest, and smiled. "That's all I need to hear," she said quietly. It was the simplest moment, but it felt like everything had clicked into place. We were ready to face whatever came next together. As we stepped into this new chapter of our lives together, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving too fast. Even though we had both been through hell and back, even though Sarah and I had found solace in each other's company, there was always that lingering doubt in the back of my mind. Was I making the right choice? Was I moving on too quickly from my past? But as we spent more time together, I realized that I wasn't running away from anything. I was moving forward. With Sarah, I didn't feel the need to look back anymore. She didn't replace Jenna, no one could ever do that. But she gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It wasn't just the emotional connection I had with her, it was the way she made me see life differently. We would sit for hours, talking about the future, the things we wanted to do, the places we wanted to see. We'd laugh about stupid things, hold hands in silence, and just enjoy being in each other's company. For the first time, I felt like I was beginning to truly heal. But life, as it always does, had other plans. It was one evening, a few weeks later, when Mark reached out again. This time, it wasn't just a random phone call. It was a direct message on social media. My stomach churned at the thought of hearing from him again, but curiosity got the best of me, and I opened the message. "Hey," the message started. "I know we've had our differences, but I need to talk. Can we meet?" Part of me wanted to ignore him, part of me wanted to just forget he existed. But another part of me felt that this was inevitable. He had been a huge part of my life once. As much as he had betrayed me, I knew that this moment had to happen. I needed closure. Or, at least, I needed to know what the hell he wanted. We agreed to meet at a cafe the following afternoon. When I arrived, Mark was already sitting at a table, looking uncomfortable, almost nervous. He wasn't the confident man I had known all those years ago. In fact, he looked broken. But maybe that's what made it harder to face him. He wasn't some villain anymore. He was just a man who had made a terrible mistake. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from him. "What do you need to say?" He cleared his throat, looking down at his hands for a moment before looking me in the eyes. "I've been a mess," he started. "I don't even know where to begin. I've lost everything. I lost you, I lost Sarah, and I don't even know why I did it." I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. It felt like I had heard this apology 100 times already, but it was never the right time. Never sincere enough. "You don't have to apologize to me, Mark," I said, feeling the weight of the past come rushing back. "You made your choices. And I made mine. But you've hurt a lot of people, and I'm not sure you fully realize the extent of that." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I'll never be able to make up for it. But I just want to say, I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't know what to say. I had spent so much time angry at him, so much time wishing for revenge, that now, in this moment, I realized I didn't need it. I didn't need his apology. What I needed was peace, and I had found that without him. I had found that with Sarah. "Look, Mark," I said after a long silence, "you're not going to get everything back. You don't get a do-over. But I've moved on. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else drag me back into the past. I've got something real now. I've got Sarah, and I'm not going to let anything ruin that." Mark looked at me for a long moment, his face hardening, but I could tell there was something else there. Regret, maybe? But it didn't matter. He wasn't my problem anymore. After a few more awkward exchanges, we parted ways. I walked out of the cafe feeling like a weight had been lifted. I had finally faced him. Finally told him that his actions didn't define me, that I was stronger than I had been before. When I returned home, Sarah was waiting for me, her presence instantly calming my nerves. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "It's done," I said, feeling a sense of finality. "It's over." She smiled softly, stepping forward to wrap me in a warm embrace. "I'm proud of you." And I was proud of myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. After that meeting with Mark, something in me shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. All the feelings I thought I had buried, the ones I thought would haunt me forever, started to fade away. I realized, as I stood there with Sarah, that I had truly moved on from everything. From Jenna. From Mark. From the life I thought I had lost. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about letting go, truly letting go. And in letting go, I was finally able to embrace the future. The future that I was building with Sarah. The days that followed felt like a new beginning. Sarah and I grew closer. We talked more openly about what we both wanted from life, from our relationship. The more we talked, the more I realized how well we fit together. It wasn't perfect, no relationship is, but it was real. And that was more than I had ever hoped for. One afternoon, Sarah and I were out shopping, just enjoying the day. It was a simple thing, but in that moment, I felt like I had everything I needed. No more running. No more looking over my shoulder. I wasn't trapped by my past anymore. I was living in the now. As we walked through the aisles, she suddenly stopped and looked at me, her eyes twinkling. "I was thinking," she said, "about what comes next. We've both been through so much. I think it's time we make some plans for the future, don't you think?" I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Plans? What kind of plans?" She smiled. "Well, we've both talked about wanting to travel, right? Maybe it's time we actually make that happen. We deserve to see the world together. I mean, I'm not getting any younger," she teased, nudging me playfully. The idea of traveling together, exploring new places, building memories, it felt right. It felt like the next step in this new chapter of our lives. "You're right," I said, grinning. "We've earned it." And just like that, the weight of the past seemed lighter. Sarah and I weren't just surviving anymore. We were planning for the future, building something together. We didn't need to know all the details, didn't need to have everything figured out. We just needed to know that we were moving forward, together. That evening, as we sat on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder, I realized how far I had come. The man I was before, the one consumed by anger, resentment, and bitterness, was gone. He had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood that life wasn't about holding on to the past. It was about embracing what's ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I knew I had found something real. Something worth fighting for. The weeks flew by, and life with Sarah felt like it was meant to be. We started making plans, not just for the next few months, but for the future that I had been too afraid to imagine before. We made decisions together, big and small, each one a step toward creating something lasting, something beautiful. We booked our first trip together, a simple getaway to a beach town, but it felt like the beginning of a new life. A life that was mine, and hers, and together, it felt like the world was ours for the taking. The day we left for our trip, I found myself thinking back to where all of this had started. To the phone call from Jenna, the betrayal, the lies. To Mark's face when he told me he was sorry. At that moment, I realized how much all of it had shaped me, but also how much I had grown from it. I wasn't the same person I was when I was married to Jenna, and I wasn't the same person I was when I was angry at Mark. I was someone different now, someone who had been through the fire and come out stronger for it. As we boarded the plane, Sarah by my side, I looked out the window and smiled. There was no turning back now. I had a life to live, a future to create, and most importantly, a love to build. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was walking toward everything I had always dreamed of, but never thought I deserved. The trip was everything we hoped for. We spent our days exploring, relaxing, and laughing together. We talked about our hopes, our fears, and everything in between. We shared stories of our pasts, but more importantly, we talked about what we wanted our future to look like. It was like a dream come true, not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. The connection, the joy, the love, it was everything I had been searching for and more. On the last night of our trip, as we sat on the beach, watching the sunset, Sarah turned to me with that same warm smile I had come to love. "You know," she said, "this feels like the beginning of something amazing." I took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. "It is. It really is." I looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I had made it through the hardest parts of my life, and I had come out stronger, more whole, and more in control than I ever thought possible. I had faced my fears, confronted my past, and found a future I never imagined. And as I looked back at Sarah, the woman who had been there for me when I needed her most, I knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever came next, we would face it together, no matter what.